As an introduction to an Architecture 170B production, I'm here to introduce to you Confronting the Canon, a biography on architect Geoffrey Bawa. In short, this focuses on an ongoing effort to confront the Western canon, where we shed light on architects that are known for bringing about new innovations and ideas into the field of architecture. This biography and architectural analysis focuses specifically on Geoffrey Bawa, a Sri Lankan architect known for the idea of tropical modernism and his perspective on context and site. Looking at his life, Geoffrey Manning Bawa was born in 1919 as a man we today recognize as a famous Sri Lankan architect who contributed to the idea of tropical modernism in the architecture world. While he is known for his works and efforts in architecture, his career did not start until later in his life, and it's important we look at the beginning. Bawa was born in Sri Lanka, or what was then known as the British colony Ceylon, and originally began a profession in law in Cambridge, England, at St. Catherine's College. This continued for several years until his mother had passed away, in which he then took to traveling the world as a result of an identity crisis. And by 1948, he bought an estate at Lunaganga with the aim to transform it into what would be known as his very first architectural work, which began to turn south immediately upon realization. So although Bawa was ambitious in his goals for Lunaganga, he realized that he had no technical knowledge or background to begin this transformation. Thus, he took an apprenticeship under H. Reed in 1951 until 1952, when the latter had passed. Continuing to architectural school back in England, he finally became a qualified and insured architect by the age of 38 in 1957. Taking over Reed's practice back in Sri Lanka, Bawa took influence from the ideas of colonial and traditional styles of architecture, while at the same time he looked towards the site and context of these buildings as inspiration for his works. To quote it in better words, his architecture is a subtle blend of modernity and tradition, east and west, formal and picturesque. He has broken down the artificial segregation of inside and outside, building and landscape. He has drawn on tradition to create an architecture that is fitting to its place, and he has also used his vast knowledge of the modern world to create an architecture that is of its time. And to get a better sense of Bawa's style, we analyzed 3 of his works. One of them being the Ina de Silva House, or the House of Surgery for Dr. Ash de Silva, that was built from 1960 to 1961. This being one of his earliest works, Bawa was able to showcase his instances at the beginning of tropical modernism. Where at the Ina de Silva House, he combined both modernist and traditional elements, utilizing a modern open floor plan concept with eye-catching ornamentation that references Colombo Sri Lankan manor homes. It ultimately presents an alternative to the colonial bungalow. Analyzing another work, specifically at a different occupancy, we look towards the Bentota Beach Hotel, built between 1967 to 1973. These ideas of tropical modernism continue to be seen over time, as a few years after the Ina de Silva House, Bawa looked to hotels in which his designs looked to context and site. This approach was an entirely different idea from the traditional methods of designing hotels globally. Geoffrey Bawa instead looked towards the location and surroundings of the project to assess how to introduce a modern style. It challenged the line between modern and traditional and serves as a reference for buildings of similar style later on. One last look at Bawa's works takes us to the Sri Lanka Parliament building that was built between 1979 to 1982. Within this work, you are able to see Sri Lankan monastic architecture, the palace architecture of Kerala, and also Kandyan temples, making it a contemporary work of Bawa's. As a whole, it references elements of local architectures to completely grasp the history of Sri Lanka's government. On the other side, it looks towards a Westminster model of organization in the main chamber, where seating is arranged on an axis from the speaker's chair. These are characteristics that Geoffrey Bawa continued to explore dating back to his earlier works. And after taking a look at his works and understanding his background, how does Bawa confront the canon? An interesting aspect was the fact that Bawa looked towards the context and information he was given in each case. He took the location, the site, and the traditions of Sri Lanka and developed them into works he produced. Now, even though we consider him an Asian architect, it's interesting to note that he possesses Western influence within his background, as his education goes back to England. And although how he uses it within his work is what I would like to rephrase as not confronting the canon, but altering it. Western work is not the only type to exist. There are other works around the world that we have not heard of, but what Bawa is capable of doing is interweaving the two. He's able to take colonial and traditional, indoor and outdoor, and a number of varying elements and blend them to create blend them together to create architecture that now influences those within the field. What I believe Bawa brings to the canon is a recognition of how two worlds exist rather than just one. Thank you.